So there's been some chatter recently that Christie might run a kamikaze presidential campaign simply to take down Donald Trump. Because he knows, hey, you got all these other candidates, they're all cucks. They all have to walk this fine line between trying to appeal to the Trump base, but also getting normal people, which is actually kind of a difficult thing to do if you think about it. And so Christie has considered, well, what if I run for president and I'm a total kamikaze, I'm not trying to win, and I just spend all my time absolutely obliterating Donald Trump? Look, I know the initial reaction some people might feel when they hear that is like, Trump is going to eat this guy for lunch. But you're forgetting something. Christie is the original Donald Trump. Christie, when he was governor of New Jersey, he'd yell at like 17 people a day. It would always be a news story. And Christie, when he ran for president the last time, he was walking on eggshells because he was listening to his advisors, and they said, look, you can't be yourself. You got to tune it in. You got to tone it down. You got to reel it in. You got to, be more of a normal politician. He listened to them for far too long. He ended up doing horribly. Only at the very end did he really unleash, and he unleashed on behalf of Trump because he made a deal with Trump. Hey, I'll be in your administration, right? And Trump was like, okay, torpedo Marco Rubio. Go after these people for me. And Christie did that. Now, you know what ended up happening? Trump stabbed Christie in the back because Christie was coming to Trump. He wanted to be VP, by the way. Not only did he not get VP, he didn't even get a position in the administration. Why? Because Christie had put Jared Kushner's dad, who was a criminal, in jail. He prosecuted him. Okay, so that came back to bite him in the ass. Well, Christie is a guy who doesn't let a grudge go easy. As we know from the whole Bridgegate scandal, remember that? He shut down the whole bridge over some personal feud. So it looks like he's going to run for president. Now, I'd love to see it, right? I would love to see it. I'd love to see Christie torpedo Donald Trump. I think Christie would be vicious, and he wouldn't stop. He would just keep going, and so it'd be fun. It'd just be fun to see. And Trump would have to scramble to handle it, but I'm sure Trump would try his best to handle it and fire back aggressively. You'd have two grown men yelling at each other like, roided up high school, testosterone-fueled freaks. Okay. Well, this was interesting. Christie, doing an interview with Semaphore, he took some pretty clear shots here at Ron DeSantis as well. Let's listen, and then I'll break it down.
Contribution and arguments. How about Ron DeSantis and Disney?
Well, there's so much there. So let's start off with this. I'm a conservative, and I believe as a conservative, the job of government is in the main to stay out of the business of business. I don't think we should be heavily regulating business. I don't think we should be telling business what to do, what to say, how to think. And I believe that's what conservatives have believed for as long as I've been alive. I don't think Ron DeSantis is a conservative based on his actions towards Disney. I mean, where are we headed here now? That if you express disagreement in this country, the government is allowed to punish you? To me, that's what I always thought liberals did. And now all of a sudden, here we are participating in this with a Republican governor. And the second piece of it is, I'm all for the appropriate use of governmental power to achieve laudable goals. And when you're the governor of a state, and our governorship is constitutionally the most powerful governorship in the country. The New Jersey governorship has enormous authority. And I loved using the levers of that authority to be able to accomplish things. But when you put someone in that position, or like a position of president, if you're going to use those levers, you got to look around the corners to see what the result of that'll be. For him to have taken the action he took against Disney, and to not have foreseen that Disney was going to do what they did in response, which was to completely take over the millions and millions of acres and the zoning decisions on that before they got the authority, well, I'll tell you this much. That's not the guy I want sitting across from President Xi and negotiating our next agreement with China, or sitting across from Putin and trying to resolve what's happening in Ukraine, if you can't see around a corner that Bob Iger created for you.
Damn. So what he's referring to there at the end is, Ron DeSantis has had it out for Disney. He's gone after Disney. He did some political moves to basically try to have the state take over, the board that runs Disney. And so he's trying to defang them, effectively. And he thought he successfully did it. But at the last minute, Disney flexed their power, and they were able to do a little jujitsu move where they retained all the power. They took the power away from the state officials, the board that DeSantis was putting in to run Disney. And Disney was like, And they basically defang the power of that board. They retain power for decision making. And, you know, I'm really simplifying this, but that's the gist of what happened. And, you know, Ron DeSantis got a little bit of a lesson here in who really has the power and the control in America. Honestly, it is more the corporations than it is the government. I mean, the government has tremendous authority, but they're usually flexing that authority on behalf of the corporations. And when they're not doing that, the corporations find a way to get the upper hand. And that's why you had this clip that just went viral of Ron DeSantis basically doing a press conference and saying, maybe we'll build a state prison right next to, Disney. Or, in other words, he's like, I'm going to retaliate in one way or another because of what happened here. I don't know if this is a political battle that Ron DeSantis can win because, again, Disney and every major corporation has tremendous power and authority. And, DeSantis did not outmaneuver Disney. Disney outmaneuvered DeSantis. Okay? So this is what Christie's pointing out. Now, that, it's a fair point, right? Like, you couldn't outwit Bob Iger, but you think you're going to outwit, like, Putin or Xi or whoever. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Seems like you should have been able to outmaneuver Bob Iger, right? But his other point was like, I don't think Ron DeSantis is a conservative. And from his perspective, he goes, conservatives are in favor of business, basically live and let live. They do what they want. The government shouldn't interfere unless they absolutely have to. And they didn't have to interfere here, but DeSantis did. So he's saying that's really not conservatism. Look, I understand the point he's making, but they're different definitions and perspectives on what is conservatism. And Christie's going with the traditional view of conservatism of like small government, don't get in the way of business. That's one view of conservatism. So by that definition, yes, Christie is more conservative than Ron DeSantis. Another view of conservatism is preserving tradition. And that's the argument Ron DeSantis would make vis-a-vis Disney from his perspective. He would argue, I think Disney is not respecting tradition by doing whatever LGBTQ Pride Day or whatever they're mad about. I mean, they wake up, Ben Shapiro was ranting against, I hear that in the next Frozen, one of the characters will be gay, and I'm outraged. They're going to be a lesbian. So they would argue, oh, you're not respecting tradition because you're, accepting and tolerating LGBTQ identity. So now I will use the power of government to try to force you to be more traditional, be more conservative, be more anti-gay, right? Like, so there are different definitions of conservatism. One is respecting tradition, and he's using the state to enforce that. That's one idea of conservatism. Another one is small government, don't interfere with business. So I get his argument, but it's, that one's a little bit hollow. And by the way, on the principle of, he's like, you should let business do their thing. You shouldn't though, right? Like, you shouldn't. As a general rule, the government should be there as a referee. Now, it just so happens, Ron DeSantis is using the power of government, in this instance, incorrectly and wrongly, and it's bad that he's flexing state power to try to control Disney over these sorts of disagreements, right? Over, hey, you tolerate gay people. Like, that's not the right way to use government power, but on the principle of using government power to regulate business, well, yeah, I think any reasonable person would agree to at least some of that, right? Like, even if you're a conservative, you can say, I think building codes are good, right? Like, I don't want a building to collapse in on me if there's an earthquake or if there's a hurricane or whatever. If there's a strong storm, building codes are good. That's one way the government gets involved in the private market and with private businesses to try to regulate and protect for everybody. Taxing corporations, that's a good thing. But look, now he's going after DeSantis too. I don't know, man. Maybe his kamikaze campaign, he's convinced himself in his own mind. Maybe it's not a kamikaze campaign. Maybe I think I can win. Which, LOL, you can't, Christie. But I still love the idea of him running just to cause a mess, just to make everybody fight, just to go after everybody viciously. I would enjoy that. And we're starting to see the beginning of that right here. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.